Welcome to spoilers on Space Vampires. Boo.
Where to start?
Yeah, I mean, whoa.
Drinking becomes a drinking game.
Yes, if you drink every time I drink, you will be dead.
But
Whoa.
yeah, clearly a product of the time when no man would ever be without a tumbler of whiskey in his hand.
Yes, it does feel like that.
It is whiskey virtually every time, isn't it?
Whiskey
Whiskey
or they have martini, they have
that's true.
Vodka, they have wine, red and white at one point. Bourbon, whiskey. I forget what else they have, yeah.
But the ship.
Oh, champagne.
Ah, yes.
Right, we'll start at the start with the spaceship.
Yes.
Now, it's a British spacecraft run by the
ESA.
the ESA. ESA?
Well, yeah. I don't actually know.
It seems like a British or space organisation.
Again, I might be thinking the film, because the ESA is prominently featured in the...
No, I think it's the British Space Institute.
Yes.
In the book. But that's odd because this book was written 4 or 5 years, depending on written or published, after the cancellation of the British space rocket Black Arrow, which was essentially the British's space operation. Also, the spacecrafts. Well, this is set in, 2076. So it's some years ahead from now. Even still.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was set like 100 years ahead of when it was writ in 1976. So it was set in 2076. And the idea of spacecrafts is slightly odd from our standpoint. Just because, one, it seems like an all-male crew.
Yes.
2, they not only have a whiskey ration,
yeah,
they have full Christmas dinner plus trimmings and champagne. And this is the one which made me just go, okay, maybe some of the other stuff, they're allowed to smoke.
Yes.
On board the spaceship. It's like, okay.
I mean, we are talking about a time period when you were still allowed to smoke on planes.
Oh, yes, you're still allowed to smoke anywhere. But he just did strike me as odd.
I mean, to take the story as a whole, it was both, for me to read it, it was both concise, but also rambling. And I know that seems really contradictory.
Yeah, I think I get what you mean. But yeah.
I felt when I was reading it, it was concise. It was nice. There was very little in terms of waffly bits. It harkened back to a time, if I was creating a movie in my mind with my imagination, it harkened back to the time where you could have films that would run for an hour and a half and everything would be packed into that hour and a half, and you get characterization, plot, themes, everything would fit into that 1.5 hour gap, right? Before we had the days of cinematic universes where you could push stuff to other elements and push some storytelling to other movies or push some characterization to series. it was nice to go back to a point where this is your character, and then other elements, the exposition of certain science fiction and the certain elements that required for the story, some of that was, as you pointed out in the last video, very exposition heavy.
Yes.
And it's stuff that you needed to know to get the ideas behind what Wilson is trying to say, but sometimes it can drag. It's like a drag shoot on some of the...
I don't know. For me, it never dragged because it was always sort of giving me new information or new ways to look at things.
Mm.
It was fully fleshing out its topics. But yeah, if you step back from it, there's a lot of scenes where it's normally two characters in a room drinking whiskey, talking to each other, or one telling the other character something.
And the whiskey element was incredibly important.
Right on. We'll go on to Coulson, the main character in it. Now, started off, and I was kind of neutral about him because he's sort of a captain of the Hermes. He was sort of like the captain role, fine. He was kind of neutral and stoic. When he got back to Earth, he came a bit nonplussed about things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he gets someone killed.
Yes.
Someone, like, he gets a child of an ex-lover killed. And he just seems not fazed at all by it.
Yes. It's almost like, oh, well, them's the breaks.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I have, the child deserved what he got.
He does.
I mean, I'm like 100%, yeah. But Carlson felt nothing wrong that he put him in that position. Like, snuck him through security. Well, he didn't snake him through security. He just went, I'm Coulson.
See, there was the other thing that confused me. Coulson's the captain of the spaceship, right? Can understand that much. They come back to Earth. The 3 space vampires are essentially placed into quarantine, but Coulson is still very much...
I would even say quarantine, but yeah.
But he's still very much involved with that element of the mission. For me, it would almost be like Armstrong coming back from the moon and then being asked to do the scientific evaluation on the stuff that he brought back. And it confused me a little bit that he would still be involved.
That's the thing. For me, it's not the fact he's involved in doing research. He's the mouthpiece because he's the person who found it. His face got plastered all over the news. He's, whether he likes it or not, the spokesman for this. So they have to let him in and go, look, this is what we found. Because he was building up to do a publicity show the day after.
True. It just...
So, it felt like he was there as, the token celebrity, the face of this whole circus.
But by the same token, I don't know whether I'm just applying modern sensibilities, modern security ideas to it. Just the idea, as I say, that you would have essentially the Neil Armstrong character then going to security and saying, don't worry, just...
I'll let this go.
I've got this kid here, I just want him to see the moon rocks.
But yeah,
I can't imagine
also,
that would
in the book itself, he's kind of odd on that account because, I mean, he does mention that the director of the Space Centre let some other people in So Carlson thinks it's okay to take this kid in.
Yes.
But then when they're there, there's only a lift going to the floors. There's no stairs because of security.
Yeah.
So everything's accessed by the lift. But then, if you know someone, hey, they'll just take you in and show you around. And that might be a sign of the times.
Yes. I think it's possibly...
More than, yeah.
Yeah, because the idea that type of thing... I mean, don't get me wrong, it probably still happens, and it probably still happens in certain levels of high security. I mean, I'm not talking about levels of high security like, for instance, military, and this is what it is. Military high security just feels like it would be, no, you're not taking that person in. I don't care if you're the fucking queen.
Yeah, they haven't got ID.
Yeah.
You know.
And
that's
maybe
above my pay grade, yeah.
But, you know, back in the 70s, I can imagine it'd be like, hey, take this bottle of champagne that I snuck off the ship. Just go and look the other way. Perhaps that would work.
Yeah.
I mean...
It very, lacks security, should I say.
But it lacks security surrounding the first instance of extraterrestrial life. It just... It feels to me like that would be absolutely shut tight.
But at that point, they do think they've brought back corpses.
True.
Like, everything's dead. They're going to have a big press conference tomorrow. So, what's the harm?
But they also make a reference to the Ganymede incident, which you get the impression is some sort of extraterrestrial virus that killed a hell of a lot of people, and presumably there are quarantine procedures in place, and yet this kid just goes, oh, that's fine, open the morgue drawer.
Let's talk about some of the technology in it, like the grasshopper.
Yeah.
Because that's probably the most fleshed out.
I got shades of Jerry Anderson. I genuinely did. The back of my mind was just going Captain Scarlet.
That's what I was thinking, you know, that sort of silver.
Yeah.
Like, sort of plastic, but like done so it looks like metal.
Yeah. Like this chromed, chromed plastic. But it was very vivid. And that is, I've got to be honest, that was an impressive feat to put across.
I'm still not sure how it fully works, because it's got wings that retract and come in. It goes about 300 miles per hour when in jet mode, sort of thing. But it can hover on the ground like a vehicle and just go places like a car. And it's got some sort of sat nav.
Yeah. Which in the 1970s, no less. Which
was impressive.
Yeah. But there was an inordinate amount of effort put into visualizing that car, boat, plane.
Well, like, you say that, I still couldn't pinpoint whether it looked more like a helicopter or a jet, or
for me, like I say, it kind of, the image that I got in my mind was like Captain Scarlet's pursuit vehicle, but perhaps with retractable wings. Yeah. Although I think I've seen something like that in the newer animated Captain Scarlet, so perhaps that's why it was so vivid to me that's what was coming across.
It does feel like that, yeah. I mean, that is probably one of the best pieces of technology. There's also, the other one would be the video phones.
Yeah. Again, the concept of the video phone, again, back in the 70s, I
mean, I don't think it was a new concept for the 70s.
No, because
I think it was mostly over, but yeah.
Well, there's the thing. I still think there was impressions of your Jerry Anderson, Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet. It's possibly even feeding into that, or because of the 60s influence of the Jerry Anderson stuff, perhaps. Yeah. My imagination is then feeding into that.
Well, no, I mean, that's some of the ideas I was getting across, especially with the video phone. But yeah, That was very interesting at times. But anyway, to go back to Colson, the thing I didn't like about him was he cheats on his wife at a drop of a hat.
Yeah.
And like the first, like some of them could be explained like, oh, the vampire's taking over him and forcing him sort of to do this, maybe. But some of them, like, especially the later ones, and maybe the Swedish one, definitely, it's like, yeah, he makes love to while his wife's photo
is on the bedside table.
And it's just like, no, I'm sorry. I don't like. I don't like the guy. I'm not going to say I don't blame him, but I don't like the guy.
His Swedish blonde comes to you, and
but that's the thing. I'm not even sure they. Maybe that one's the closest one I actually got to having sex. But even then, I'm not 100% sure they had sex.
Or
whether it was just.
It's not described.
No, it's mostly described as like
energy
light petting.
Well, so it's like energy transfer. They could have done it basically in their underwear, and
there is some a euphemistic term where he gives her oral sex. But that's as close as I think it gets.
Yeah, but there's also a thing with the transfer of energy being more. Several times the count specifies it that the transfer of energy is easier done through mouth-to-mouth contact.
Yes. It was just he's cheating on his wife and he's in full control.
It's not just his wife though. But he's got children.
Yes.
Which make you feel even worse for.
Well, like his wife is brilliant.
Yeah.
She's been looking after these kids all the time while he's been in space.
Yes.
Comes back, and not only is she looking after her kids, but she's looking after him, bringing him coffee in the morning.
Yes.
The only time he has a non-alcoholic drink. And also, this might go back to your point that they are not actually British, because they're drinking coffee, not tea.
That's true.
And for the 1970s, I would think they would be drinking tea.
Perhaps.
And not coffee.
But then, for the British Space Agency, I know that there's restrictions, or at least there were restrictions, for NASA that you could not be a NASA astronaut if you weren't American.
But yeah, Carlson, I didn't really like. Like I was like, and then the epilogue happened,
and then you find out that he's obviously divorced his wife at some point.
He's been married 3 times. It's like, what was the Swedish nurse? Was she the second wife?
Yeah.
Just seems, and he traded her in for a younger model later on. Then it becomes like too misogynistic for me, because they could have so easily gone, oh, these 3 nurses have set up clinics around the world, and they're developing the ideas from the Count and from Colson and stuff, and had them being actual players as well.
Yes.
Like on an equal to some of the male characters.
To a point, I mean...
And it would have been interesting to see if... Because most of it revolves around older men marrying younger women.
Yes.
And it's like, well, does the reverse happen? Like, can you have old women marrying younger men? Also, most of, like, Colson's ideas, it seemed to be... It wasn't about, like, it was easier to get more energy from younger people. But it seems most of his ideas were coalescing around it's like a circular transference. It's like you meet this person and it completes a circuit and you both become more alive if you do it right.
Yeah.
If you do it right, like, you know, one's a bad actor, they suck the energy from the other one.
Yes. So it becomes parasitism rather than symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I thought the epilogue would be about. And you could bring the women back into it. And it would be like a bit more coherent and also a fully formed, rounded theory rather than men need younger women.
Perhaps.
Because I felt that was where it was going.
Yeah. I think, again,
but they're just
perhaps product of the time, because you get the impression that the Count, the three women that are part of his retinue, are not the first.
No. But you also get the idea that he's on the cutting edge of the research and he's actually teaching them
he's on
something.
He's on the cutting edge of the research, but I could easily imagine someone reading this book and just thinking he's a dirty old man with three young students that he's teaching, and that it's some sort of cultist, you know, some sort of cultist nightmare that he's essentially preying on young, vulnerable women. And while I don't think that's the case, because he does go out, Wilson does go out of his way to make it that the Count is actually justified in what he's doing. He's not just a predator. He is actually doing the research, and it seems to be working because the man is, 80 odd, and he doesn't look a day over 50.
Yeah,
if that.
Count Magnuson will divulge into that. Count Magnuson, who's mentioned, the actual historical Magnus is not evil, and he never massacred anyone. He never went on a black pilgrimage, nothing like that. Mostly all of that is from the M.R. James story, which is a short little ghost story.
Right.
And which, it does say, it points it out, sticks an arrow on it, make sure it's neon. You know, M.R. James. Which, I do like M.R. James. So I have read that story, so I know which one he's going on about.
Yeah.
But he's the Count Magnus in that story, who is just evil, not the actual Count Magnus,
historical figure.
The historical figure.
Okay.
But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Because it's his house that the Count is living in.
Yes, he came to it and it had been abandoned for a few years before, 6 months or something like that.
That's right, yeah. For some reason, I made the connection that they were related.
No.
Okay.
Maybe it's because, he's got his portrait up and...
Yeah.
And he takes him to go and see, oh, look, this is his actual burial crypt.
Yes. And when they walk in, it's feelings of doom and gloom, and the energy is still being drawn out of the place, like you might describe a haunted site, or at least how some of the things like Most Haunted, or some of the shows that deal with paranormal activity would describe feeling a haunted site.
Also, that's the thing, because it basically hints that he was taken over by a space vampire at one point.
And that they've visited before.
Yeah. But he is still... He's in the coffin, and so is the space vampire. Because the space vampire still embeds the body. That's why there's this field.
Yeah.
So if anyone went and actually kissed him, he could suck the life out of him and come back to life. That's what I was saying. He was just I wonder if that's possible. Within the story.
Well, I mean, the epilogue with Carlton itself seems to suggest that he's not necessarily dead because his wife gives the guy this strange look.
But he's like radiating a sort of a
positive energy.
Yeah, positive energy.
But to go back to Coulson, I had to question myself as to whether some of the actions that he takes are in fact his. Like you say, with the dumping his wife at the drop of a hat, or at least not even recognising the fact that he spent the night with this wonderful Swedish girl. When you get to the end of the story and it actually turns out that he's been a host himself, and you don't know how long for.
Well, that's thing. Has he, or has he just brought out his like inner one? Has he just developed his own ability, which is innate in every creature?
Perhaps, but the creature.
Because that's how I read it. It was he developed his own personal one, and like his interaction with the Space Vampire unlocked it, and so he could develop it more
to tap into those powers. Perhaps, but then the presence at the very end, which is judging the three, that seems to suggest that he's played host to something. Perhaps not knowingly, but that he's.
But that entity goes away.
Yeah, and Coulson remains with the powers. But I mean, to go on to that point, actually, to jump right ahead to the end of the book, that entity comes out of nowhere.
Oh,
it feels very Deus Ex Machina to suddenly go, oh yes, this creature has been inhabiting.
Well, that's it's not inhabiting it as recently, because it's been on Earth. Well, not on Earth, but it's occasionally visiting Earth, looking for these.
Yeah, the stranger. The stranger, the contents of the stranger, and the three on Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he occasionally comes back and inhabited his body just there and then, just in the nick of time, to go, no, look, I'm going to sort this out. Because he found them, because he's like, found them.
Yeah.
At last. That's how I read it. So he had just jumped into him.
Well, that was what was bothering me, whether Coulson had these powers as a sleeper, and that's the reason that perhaps that this entity was sleeping in Coulson for years and years and years, or that, like you say, that he's just jumped in as a result of.
Well, you'd think he would have woken up earlier, because their whole mission was to like sort of take over humans and sort of culturally develop them, and like so they could develop, fire or tools or something like boost their evolution. But it was through sort of a more passive means than full direction, like taking control.
But the original plan was to boost them and then go back to their home world.
Yeah.
And then they hit the black hole.
That was the other thing.
Things get absolutely knackered for them. The only way to escape is to then transfer themselves into some sort of host shell. But in doing so, that then meant their ability to generate their own life energy and that's what turned them into the parasites that they then become.
But, quick diversion. Now do you see why, after reading Destiny, I went, we're reading this next?
In terms of,
it's like a higher energy being that gets drained of power and becomes a parasite, goes around killing stuff, then is found by the higher energy beings and goes, what are you doing?
Yes.
Let's fix this.
And as a result, it then ends up killing itself.
But yeah, that's the thing I thought. in the Destiny books, that would have been the conclusion for that creature.
I believe it was called Sijin.
Yeah, Sijin, yeah. Well, I was thinking they restore her and she
chooses to...
sees what she's done and just decides to kill herself. And though the other sellers don't like the idea, they accept it because they're like, fair enough.
Yeah.
You know.
Because they can't approve the act of taking a life.
But they can't stop her.
Yes. It's a personal decision.
Yes.
Which then would tie back to what happened earlier with the humans.
So I was thinking that would make fit better than what actually happened. But as I was coming up to it, I was thinking, oh yeah, space vampires. But yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting parallel to draw. Yeah. And now that you've pointed that out to me, admittedly, that the fact that I like the conclusion in this better, admittedly,
right?
Because the idea that they're then raised back to their level of godhood, and then they see what they've done and go, "We're absolute abominations," and they wipe themselves out of existence. I think that is a better resolution.
I mean, it's also a book solution. I could not see this being ever done in a film. Because most of the end would just be the main character lying in the chair while other characters fly against the wall and then some lights come out and then disappear. That's not a film ending.
It's not.
But on that note, let's go to the film.
The film.
Because there's a film based on this book. I say based. It's a loose word. But it's called
Life Force.
Life Force. It was done by Canon Films in the 80s. Yeah.
It's definitely an 80s film.
Yeah. It is, I would say, worth watching. The special effects are quite good. They're like puppetry work.
It's fun. It is a piece of fun sci-fi fluff.
If you want more action, if you've read this and want more action, go watch Life Force. If you just want more action, go watch Life Force.
Also boobs.
Oh yeah, there's boobs in it as well. I would say the book has more sex in it than the film, even though the film has a 19-year-old woman walking around naked for the majority, good 10 minutes of it.
I mean, you say that. I literally watched this earlier today, and the 19-year-old is writhing on top of the gentleman in a crypt with Christian iconography strewn around the outside. And they already proven the fact that the Christian iconography has absolutely nothing to do with the vampires. There is no, stabbing it through the heart with a crucifix. In fact, the heart is the wrong place to stab it. But, that film.
But yeah, it's an interesting film. And, it does change a lot. I think they wanted a lot more action. So, a lot of the exposition is cut out. A lot of the reasons why and stuff are cut out as well. But this goes on to the character who is in the book, who is in the film, and is played by Sir Patrick Stewart.
Who wasn't a sir at the time.
Well, yes. And
it's Dr. Armstrong.
Yeah. Plays Dr. Armstrong, and because I saw the film first and then read the book. So when it introduces Dr. Armstrong in the book, it says, the voice was fruity and cultured, an actor's voice. So I immediately started laughing. But yeah.
That does kind of describe Patrick Stewart, doesn't it?
It was just interesting. And like Patrick Stewart's playing that character. I mean, in the book, he's far more unlikable in the book. The Armstrong character.
But he is running the insane asylum, and
yes.
Again, the sexual proclivities come out in that it's almost like he's quite enjoying his position of power amongst other men.
But yeah, what was your idea? What was your thought on the film?
Cheesy 80s sci-fi. Enjoyable. I quite enjoyed watching it. I don't know whether I would watch it again in the near future, but it would be one of those ones that I could very easily put on and just go, yep, it's schlock. It's enjoyable, but
yeah, as a compared to the book,
I think the book's got a lot more going for it.
I mean, see, I would say they sort of have the same outline premise, but they do completely different things.
Yeah.
Especially at a certain point, it's just like...
Well, as you point out, it's very, very... It would be very, very difficult to do that finale.
Oh, yes.
The book's finale in a film. And it would be very, very...
I think it would be also difficult to, halfway through the movie, go off to Sweden.
Yes, because even in the book, that is very much...
alive.
Yeah. Even in the book, that is very much a... We think there's a vampire taking over people in London and they're killing people and anyone could be next. Sweden?
Well, that's it.
A couple of days in Sweden to go on a holiday?
With the book, because this was called Space Vampires for the book, and the film was going to be called Space Vampires, but they decided, no, this is going to be a science fiction spectacular. We'll up the budget and we'll make it like a premiere thing. But Space Vamps sounds a bit...
Camp?
Well, yeah. Or sounds like we're trying to sex it up too much or something. We'll call it Life Force.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like the book should be called Life Force and the film should be called Space Vampires.
Because, yeah.
Because it feels like the film is trying to sex up places. But even though the book has probably more sex in it, it is very cold.
It is done in a clinical way.
Yeah.
It is... It's like someone...
It's there. It's like all the scenes are there because trying to develop an idea and to show, like, move the plot along, or there's no sexing in it, which is, it feels there just to be a sexy, to sort of spice up the story. It feels like they're all there because it's trying to add something to the story. It's trying to add something to the ideas he's trying to get across.
The idea of the predator-prey sort of relationship between two partners, or at least in this situation.
It quickly becomes a more consensual thing. And that's why I was sort of disappointed in the epilogue. But right, so we'll end it there. Overall, you liked it?
Yes, I still maintain, even after our discussion with discussing some of the deeper themes of the book, I still think it's a good enough read. I think there are issues, as I pointed out in the introduction, but having now discussed it, it's a product of the time, and there are still ideas within that are still valuable, even if they are a little bit weighted. But I think you can get, you can get enough from the book to be entertained, and if you've got proclivities towards some of the ideas, certainly some of the sexual ideas in the book, some of the ideas with regards to life energy, ki, you can find connections there that, you'll enjoy the science fiction aspects of it a little bit more than perhaps someone who is just reading it for just an interesting bedtime read.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much more I can say.
Yeah.
I mean, it is very much an ideas book. Because the characters, there's not much characterization to them. One of even then, I would just argue it's probably just Colson, because he's the only one who sort of goes on a journey and sort of changes. Everyone else seems to stay roughly where they are. But yeah, it's more about the ideas, and it's more about exploring that idea.
Yeah.
Rather than showing any action or pacing or stuff to it. It's mostly a thinking book.
Yes.
But yeah. Anyway, next time, on the idea of a space plague, we're going to be reading Michael Crichton's Andromeda Strain. So, tune in next time for that.
Bye.
Bye.
But I mean, if you were going to have the Psychosexual Institute,
yeah,
I think it'd be more appropriate to put it in the Gherkin. Because it's got the shape.
Yeah. Yes, we know. Bloody hell. Not the shard.
Yeah, the shard. You couldn't put a landing pad on the Gherkin.